Mm-mm. That reminds me, I need to kill my phone.
All right, folks, we are now streaming live. We're gonna wait a couple more seconds just to let the computer catch up and make sure for sure. But anyway,
Sorry.
I'm hearing echoes. Apologies. Welcome to the DC Center and the Rainbow History Project, Queer Women Creating Spaces. It's a space where we can have representatives and organizers from all over the DC area talk about their history and their experiences. I'd like to introduce Rob Berger, the chair of the Rainbow History Project, to tell a little bit more about the organization. Rob? Can you unmute, please?
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. And as chair of the Rainbow History Project, it is my pleasure to welcome you today to the panel Queer Women Creating Spaces, which I'm sure will be amazing. Rainbow History Project is actually celebrating its 20th anniversary of providing these kinds of programs and services in the DMV. For the past 20 years, we've collected, preserved, and promoted the LGBTQA history of the DMV. A couple of things we've been working on, the Clubhouse Project, which you'll hear about more in a moment. Also this year, we just began the process of preserving films that Cheryl Spector had taken around DC in the 90s and 2000s of parades, pageants, parties, dances, marches, meetings, and we're very excited to see what we find there. There's lots of ways to get involved if you're interested. We're always looking for volunteers to collect or transcribe oral histories, lead virtual walking tours, organize panels like this one, communications, marketing, fundraising kinds of things. For more information, you can check us out at rainbowhistory.org or send an email to info@rainbowhistory. And with that, thank you very much and have a great day.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan Ellington. I am a board member and co-chair, along with Dane, of the panels committee for the Rainbow History Project. We are so excited for you all to be here today. Before we get started, Rob mentioned earlier about the Clubhouse Project. I was the person in charge of that, and that project is involved us getting interviews with over 15 people. Well, let me talk about what the Clubhouse is first. The Clubhouse was a site of dancing and joy and life, an after-hours club in DC from 1975 to 1990. It was the place where Children's Hour was held every Memorial Day weekend during that time period. And it was a place where Black queer community, Black LGBTQ community was created during that time, and it was a place for coping to occur during the onset of the HIV/AIDS crisis, and all of these other forces attacking the Black LGBTQ community. And so we were able to interview 15 people, get oral histories from them, and have them talk about their experiences and why that place was an amazing place for them to have fun and just an experience, really. And you can find these oral histories on our website at rainbowhistoryproject.com and look through our archives. Dean?
Thank you. I'm Dean Ray. I am, as the other board member of the Rainbow History Project. I joined the board last year with the specific intention and task of increasing visibility of voices that aren't usually captured within DC history. And so for the purposes of this panel, especially in our 20th year, we wanted to make sure that we cataloged and highlighted the voices of folks who have been continually doing work, who are leaders in their own right, who have absolutely shined in essentially our living history. Their lives, their actions, as you will hear on this panel, are absolutely invaluable. So just to kind of calibrate our conversation a little bit, the absolute reason why we're here is because women of color especially their experiences, their value has been consistently neglected in history. Their voices and talents and experiences have often been dismissed or co-opted. And so being really intentional to center, not only center, but allow folks to tell their own stories with their own voice and their own words. The Rainbow History Project, we are a nonprofit or a non-governmental organization doing this work. And so we want to encourage all of our panelists to be able to use the language they have to articulate it. And just picture as if that young person is listening, and to be able to see that there absolutely is a you at the end of that rainbow. The other kind of second to final point is the purposes of the word queer. When we're using queer for this particular conversation, it's really queer in the sense of opting out of labels or performative standards or constrictive societal labels. It could be via expression or orientation or lived identity. And so essentially when you're not opting into heteronormative standards or conformity. So that's kind of what we're using in the sense of queer identity for this conversation. We really want to thank all of our panelists for their time to be able to give the gift of this legacy for history and for DC as you are a living part. And for the format, we will ask one question at a time. We may or may not direct it at one person. Everybody on the panel has the opportunity to answer and to contribute. You can contribute with opinions and thoughts or anecdotes or story. Before we begin, are there any questions from our panelists about our format and our process for today? We should probably go for about an hour, maximum maybe an hour and a half, depending on how loquacious we get. And just to provide a container at the end of our conversation today, we will have Justin from the DC Center check the YouTube for any viewer questions, any viewer comments that they may be asking. So those will be live, and we will be able to have Justin bring those back to us that are separate from the questions that we've prepared for today. Alrighty. Dylan, would you like to kick us off with the first question?
I think before asking questions, I would love for the panelists to introduce themselves so that people can kind of get an idea where they're from. Papaya, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'm always willing, and that's a part of my legacy. Hello, everybody. I am Valerie Papaya Mann, and I'm a Washington resident, born and raised here in Washington, birthed at Freeman's Hospital in 1952, which became Howard University Hospital. So even that's historic. I have been in the Washington area most of my life, back and forth. I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia. I lived in Ghana, West Africa for almost 5 years, but I always come back to DC because it's my home. I've been doing queer organizing work probably since the 80s, and as well as events that I organized myself. And yeah, this is a great topic. I've also been a member of the Rainbow History Project Board and Advisory Board. And so I think they're doing great work by capturing these types of meetings for us because our legacy is important. And I recently, last week, celebrated my 68th birthday. And so I'm very excited when we talk about legacy. You used the name Cheryl Spector earlier. It brought tears to my eyes because I knew Cheryl and she's gone. So the only way that we can hold on to who we are is by capturing our legacy. In fact, about half of the videotapes that she had burned up in her apartment fire. And so we lost a great bit of footage some time ago. So it's just good to be creating an opportunity for other people to hear and to talk to people. So that's who I am. You know, I've done queer work. I've been executive director of 3 multi-million-dollar HIV organizations. I've been on boards for Shanti Project and health organizations. I'm a school teacher, a fitness instructor, and some other stuff. So I'll just come back when the questions are asked and talk more about who I am.
Thank you, Papaya, and happy belated birthday.
Thank you. It's good to make it to 68 and beyond, because unfortunately, many of my friends didn't make it past their 20s.
Thank you. Jordan, would you like to go next, please?
Yeah, hello everyone. Happy belated birthday, Papaya. My name is Jordan White. I am a 13-year DC resident. I'm originally from South Jersey, right outside of Philadelphia. I live in Ward 7 now, just moved from Ward 8. So I'm happy to represent east of the river. During the day, right now from home, I am a program officer for the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. We're a federal government think tank. So we try, there are people out there trying to help the government make well-informed, scientifically based decisions, and we are one of those organizations. Right now, I am the study officer and the lead on a consensus study for understanding the well-being of LGBTQI plus populations, which is due to be released in about a month and a half. So look out for that. We have some really great insight coming from there. I'm also the general manager of a women's tackle football team here in DC called the Washington Prodigy. The Prodigy have been around now for 8 years, and we are a nonprofit sports organization. And we have done community work with several schools in the area, and then prominent LGBT advocacy organizations like Team DC, and we volunteered at several Whitman Walker events. So we try to stay very grounded and always support our primary fan base. Of course, it's a women's team, so women are our major audience, our biggest supporters. So HRC is another partner of ours. And pre-pandemic, I also bartended at Nellie's Sports Bar. So I'm just really appreciative of all the connections that I've been able to make in the community, both professionally, personally, through a lot of my my passions, my athletic endeavors. And I try at any point that I can to be a voice for the community and to show up and support where support is needed. So I'm really happy to be here and participate in this discussion.
Thank you, Jordan. We're really happy that you're here too. Emilia, can you round us off with just introducing yourself?
Hey everyone, my name's Emilia Talarico. I am one of the co-founders of No Justice, No Pride, Disrupt J20, and Occupy Our Homes DC. Yeah, been doing a lot of different direct actions and just different forms of supporting our community members and stuff like that.
And what specific community members?
Most notably, Black and brown trans sex workers.
Thank you. I think that's important. Dane, do you want to do a question?
Yeah, absolutely. I will start with what and how did you prepare for the work you were doing today? What and how have you prepared for the work that you're doing today? And I'll actually kick it off to Jordan just to start us off.
What and how? So the interesting thing, so like I said, we're leading up a 2-year, which is about to come to completion, study on understanding the well-being of LGBTQ populations. And even as a member of this community, when I got the charge, I was humbled and felt a bit underqualified. And I know that that's imposter syndrome talking, but moving through the world as a cisgender queer woman, I know that my experiences, although very valid, very real, and and I see vicariously through, you know, my friends and the people that I care about, you know, it only scratches the surface of what this community goes through. So it was really important to me as I was, you know, building our committee and figuring out, you know, who to talk to get this information, that I included other voices, you know, because I could write pages and pages about my own experience and it would resonate with a fraction of the people, but there would be other people who still wouldn't feel represented, based on ethnicity, based on presentation, based on gender identity, intersex status. I mean, there, you know, there's so many things. So definitely, I mean, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I know it's about networks, but it's so important to, you know, to have a network and just to understand that you may know a lot about a few things, but you can never understand, you know, the full spectrum, and maybe we'll never be able to because it is so broad. But the goal is to always continue putting forth effort in trying to learn from other people's experiences and insights, and understanding that, you know, even though it may not be your experience, that it's equally, if not even more, you know, valid and pertinent, in their lives and the lives of others. So really just kind of, you know, humbling myself, stepping back and saying, you know, yeah, I've been in this community for a long time, but please, I'm leading you, but please inform me and let me know how I can best be a leader. So.
I have a quick follow-up question for you. So it sounds like, based off of your answer, there's a lot of self-awareness tapped into kind of your external community, what you're connected to, who you're connected to. Does self-awareness continue to shape what you do, both personally and professionally?
Absolutely. You know, I have a very strong network of, you know, of friends, but just like most of us, you know, association breeds assimilation. You know, they're my friends because they share experiences, they share identities, you know, a lot of them look like me, or, you know, they're interested in the same things that I'm interested in. And they're the ones who, you know, support my decisions, inform my decisions, and who I'm exposed to. But I have to understand that there are other people doing the same things, you know, in their networks as well. So the information that I have, even though, you know, it may be broad, and I may try to, you know, make sure that I surround myself with people from different perspectives and histories, it's still limited to what I have access to. And so just always understanding that, you know, there might be more. Go look, you know, more information, more opinions. I could be right about something, but someone else could be equally right from another perspective. So the more work that I do and the more that I learn, I feel like the more I see that. So it empowers me to speak up and share mine, because maybe they don't know, you know, conversely, what I'm going through as well. But just always having an ear to listen, I think, is incredibly important, and realizing that we're all just very small dots, you know, in the bigger picture.
Thank you so much for your response, Jordan. And of course, this is open to the rest of the panelists as well. Just what or how has what you've done informed the work you do today? Feel free to answer.
Well, I'd like to respond to that question, because I think that that's a question that is important, because it speaks to our culture, our upbringing, our successes, our challenges, because we bring all of that into the room with us to whatever work we do, quite frankly. So, you know, I'd say that a foundation to growing up as a Black girl in America, in Washington, D.C., that alone helped me to become the person that I am, being first in a lot of places, especially in my generation, you know, the first in my family to graduate from college, the first in my family to work and be in certain places, being at American University and sitting in the front of the classroom because I was the only Black person there. So all of those things I bring to my queer work and brought to my queer work, because I didn't just begin when I realized I was a lesbian. So I believe that our experiences and our family and our upbringing shapes us, as well as the times that we're in. I've been doing this work for a little bit like 40 years. So it's been a continuous process, so much so that I am who I am, and it involves activism. I don't have to do a job. I don't get paid to do this work. I don't do it because it's a job. I do it because it's a life, and because there are people out there who need to understand that there was a past before now, and that we don't need to continue to repeat patterns. So what makes us who we are is everything that's pushing in on us, and every opportunity that we've had, and everybody we've ever spoken to, and the people's whose shoulders we stand on. Because I'm not a self-made person. I'm a product of every person that's been in my family, and every mentor that I've ever crossed. So that's a huge, broad question, and I just wanted to take it there because it's hopefully young people, like you and Dylan, who are doing the quote work, and as work, as you get older and you are in this for life, then it doesn't matter whether you have a job related to it or not. You just do what you have to do, and you show up when you have to show up. Um, you've talked about the clubhouse. Well, I was blessed to be at the clubhouse during the good times and the bad times, because there were some bad times too. The clubhouse was a wonderful place for us to go and hang out, uh, and to be together. But when the AIDS epidemic showed up, it became an awful place to be, because people were missing, and because people were sick, and people were afraid, and we didn't know how you could catch it or not catch it. So kudos to the Rainbow History Project for investing in doing that work around the clubhouse, as well as there's a group now that has gotten some money to do a film about the coffee house, which is where Ray Melrose was. So I believe that our history and herstory informs who we are, and that cumulatively the experiences that we have inform who we are. And certainly what has shaped me over these years is all of it. I was in the civil rights movement. That has shaped me just as much as being a part of the LBGT movement, because I'm walking around in blackface every day. Before anybody even asks me or even thinks about my sexuality, I'm a Black woman in America. So these things all are part of our advocacy and who we become, and certainly who we grow into and who we mellow into, as well as how we perceive our lives as we continue to age, which I would like to talk about more, but I want to give you all an opportunity to roll out your agenda.
Sure, Papaya, if you don't mind, I actually have a follow-up question based off of your answer as well. You mentioned the beginning of your answer being in a lot of spaces for the first time. Sometimes that means like being the only one. Sometimes that meant explicitly being the first. When you don't have the instruction manual, when you don't have that mentor, when you don't have the nod or that person just to sit you at the table and to call you forward, what were those moments like, and how did you negotiate those moments where you literally in the moment had to figure out those moments when you were showing up for yourself or for a collective community?
That's a great question. And I would say that because I was part of Clubhouse, and certainly I was one of the people that helped give Children's Hour and stayed up all night and danced all night, and the Clubhouse where we had artistic expressions and so on. And I was also one of the founding board members of Sapphire Sapphos, probably the Black lesbian organization on record as the first one, as well as I was a part of the first Third World African Gay and Lesbian, which was a Black conference that we gave. So how do you, at this point, 40 years later, I'm a change agent. I just do it because I'm able, but at those times, we were driven out of necessity. I remember the Rainbow History Project when it became a part of everything, and Cheryl Spector and Chuck Goldfarb, and people who are still doing the work. So I think that a lot of us had energy and strength because we were living through a pandemic. You know, I was also, when Jim Graham became the president of, or the executive director of Whitman Walker Clinic, he hired me to do public relations for HIV and AIDS. And I have documents that say there's a couple of hundred cases in the country. So I was doing public relations after I got my degree out of American University, as well as doing different types of events. So I've kind of been a first kind of person, and I believe that that's a muscle that we can exercise. I believe that you can grow that muscle as well as you can be born that type of person. Like an A personality type is just a person that goes out there and does out of their personality. Personality can push you forward. But some people learn to be activists and learn to find that place inside of them that makes them unafraid to be the first in anything. Certainly, as we succeed, there have been failures. However, there have been more successes than failures. So I believe that we learn to take a punch and you learn to just keep moving on. How many times do people say no? Certainly in the 80s, one of the big issues we were fighting was in the LBGT community, because we'd go to clubs and bars and we'd be carded. And you couldn't even get a drink or go sit down together. So there are lots of issues on the table, and I know that we'll go back to talking about creating women's spaces, but that the women's spaces were important because the men dominated the other spaces and we needed spaces. So that's why we created Sapphire Sapphos as a place where women could come and talk to each other, where we could have workshops, where we could form advocacy groups, where we could form programs and educational programs for our children, where we could have a voice as a united group of women. And that was the early 80s. Actually, we started those meetings the last few days of the 70s. So there's always been a need for lesbian women to have spaces, and as a broader category, queer women to have spaces where we can talk and be with each other. Because quite frankly, we have lost many of those spaces. Many of them were bookstores. Some of them were restaurants. Some of them were centers, community centers, and many of them were our homes. Well, as we've aged, we've lost those spaces. And I coined a word today as I was looking at my notes, which is called progress. Let me look at this again. Pardon me. It's called that we have a progress decentralization within the LBG community. We've been decentralized through progress. There are fewer places for me to go and be with lesbians and other women like me, because we don't have restaurants, we don't have clubs, we don't have bars, and we don't have places that we went and socialized together to come together. I mean, there's still some organizations that are trying to do things like that, like Women in the Life is going through a resurgence. And, I still work with women out on the West Coast, NIA Collective, they're trying to get themselves together. ULOA, United Lesbians of African Descent, down south, I've been participating in Black Women Rise. Up in New York, they have the Black Lesbian Conference, which won't happen this year. So we've always needed to have spaces, and there are still people out there trying to create spaces, but through progress decentralization, we're further apart than we ever were. And there are more differences. So I would just say that we have become closer as a community around advocacy and legal issues, but we've decentralized around class, Um, Lesbians are even less involved with our brothers than we have been since the HIV epidemic soared in the 80s and early 90s. I see fewer men in my life. I see fewer queer people in general because we don't have places. And then you add a nice thick layer of coronavirus on top of it, which pushes us all away from each other. So it becomes even more important to have panel discussions like this because the clubhouse, the coffee house, Sapphire Sapphos, Black lesbian support groups, you know, all the social events we used to give, you know, I've given events and thousands of women have come to those events and they still see me and say, why don't you give us a party? But that's because we don't have so many spaces. So anyway, I don't want to ramble, but those are some of my thoughts about creating spaces for women, as well as doing this beyond work. It's a lifestyle. I'm a lesbian all the time, not just when I'm at work. I'm a lesbian at home, in the supermarket, in the parks, when I'm standing in line to get a coronavirus test, all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for that gift of progress decentralization. That was great. Dylan.
All right. So my question is, so this is a panel about you all who have created spaces, spaces for your communities, spaces for queer communities. So can you talk about one or two specific spaces that you created and how it came about and why you felt it was important for the community to have that space? If possible, Imalaya, could you go first? You are muted.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes, so since this is a panel about the spaces that you all created, can you talk about this one or two spaces that you've created for the community, for your community, and why you felt it was important for the community to have a space like that?
Well, I felt like I grew up on videos of Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera speaking to crowds of people about how their own community abandons them left and right. And so, you know, here I am coming into my own world as a young adult, as a trans woman, and seeing, what was that famous video shot by Sylvia? That was in 1973. Seeing in 2013, 40 years later, the same exact shit that she was complaining about. Cis queer people not giving a fuck about the girls. Our voices never mentioned in any movement spaces. I was often the only trans person in most movement spaces when I first started activism when I was young. And like, just like even thinking about like service-based organizations, LGBT service-based organizations in the city, watching like people use stats that affect trans women and trans communities of color, and using those stats like in kind of like what I would deem as a malicious way in order to fund their own initiatives that never centered trans communities. And so in 2018, FOSTA, SESTA, two really shitty bills went through Congress, got enacted, and that destroyed like an underground economic safety net for a lot of the girls. More familiar for a lot of folks, like you hear about Backpage being shut down, the Craigslist personal ads. A lot of the girls, you know, trans women are 10 times more likely to engage in sex work than any other community. And a lot of it is because of employment discrimination. A lot of it is like so-called leaders who don't actually go and intersect with the trans community members, and then so they don't really have any leaders, they don't have any guidance, and like people get stuck like in these positions. And at least when Backpage and Craigslist was around, people had the ability to they had the ability to basically screen their dates better. Street-based sex work versus online sex work, like the income is very different. When you work on the street, sometimes like you get into a car and you name your price and the guy says, hell no, I'm not paying you that. I'm giving you $60 and then you're going to do this to me. And sometimes you be real scared. You're stuck in a bad place. Where when these websites were around, like the guy just never got your address. If he didn't want to pay your rate, he didn't get your address. And so when Backpage and Craigslist and those things went down because of these two bills, everyone was scrambling, especially the young girls. Like there was no one out there helping them. Most of these girls had previously been able to live with the wages they're making off of these websites and be able to pay motel fees or apartment fees. And like overnight, it's like a third of the community was homeless. And, like we weren't a service-based organization. Still today, I don't think No Justice, No Pride is just a service-based organization. But we're like, well, I have a living room. Y'all are coming to stay here. Like, you're not fucking sleeping under no highway bridge. Like, and that's kind of what led on to the No Justice, No Pride collective housing. So initially we're like, yo, there's a lot of people in this movement who have extra bedrooms who are just like not doing shit with it, or people who have big enough living room space. And so the idea was like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure all of our people are housed by hitting up these movement people that never center us in their meetings and telling them, no, you got an extra bedroom. She needs to sleep there. We tried that for a while, and honestly, after 6 months, we've only ever gotten one person to be like, okay, I will give up some uncomfortability in this to make sure this Black trans woman has a safe place to sleep tonight. And so by that point, I'm just like, this is fucked. Like, we just got to change up the system. There's not anything right now that works for them. And the system that like all these LGBT leaders like fucking, I don't even know how to describe it, like really just like base their bullshit and doesn't do shit for them. Do shit for them. We got motherfuckers who claim to be running the biggest LGBT youth housing fucking project in the city. Meanwhile, she's so far up Mayor Bowser's ass that she's not making no comments about her destroying public housing. Let me tell you something. You got all them girls in transitional housing relying on these housing vouchers. Where the hell you expect them to go when Mayor Bowser's bulldozing public housing, when there's no enforcement policies out there on voucher discrimination, and the list goes on and on. So we're like, no, we gotta change the dynamic. And so we started hustling. I started paying for apartments, houses with fucking sex work money. And eventually we just got so big that we just kept expanding, throwing it in Mayor Bowser's face, being like, you have all the money in the world to house these people and you don't. And then like you let these little nonprofits get behind you and boast that the city is so progressive and so in love with the LGBT people. Meanwhile, you letting the most marginalized of the LGBT community just sit out there and rot, while like the new fucking white people that come into the city keeps pushing them further and further out of the city because they call them a nuisance. And so I guess going back to your question, one of the spaces we made was we made sure that our people had access to free housing without any of the other shit, without needing to sign in and having your name be used in some sort of shit for the government to prove that these people are being housed, without no bed checks, without no cameras. They're free to come and go. They didn't have to have no vacation passes. That was a dream that we were building.
Thank you. Jordan, would you like to answer the question? You are muted.
Sure. Well, my answer is nowhere near that profound, Melia. So thank you for that and for what you're doing to provide safe spaces for the trans community of color. I would say, just in addition to, my own personal spaces that I try to make as open and welcoming as possible, back in 2012, a dear friend and a teammate of mine on our former football team became very disenchanted with our experience as players. On the field, things were going great. Our team was successful. But off the field, we had tried to partner with a lot of LGBT, different like social organizations, advocacy organizations, because again, like I said, these teams are women. Football's not a gay sport. Our team wasn't a gay team. But when you look at the landscape of who's playing, who's watching, who's sharing and supporting, it was queer women, many queer women of color, but, queer women of all ethnicities. And we really tried to capitalize on that, especially since, we're not getting paid. We're paying to play. Fundraising is major. So why not tap into the spaces and organizations where our support is coming from when we're doing these fundraisers and things like that. And we just didn't feel like the experience on a holistic level was meeting our needs, as players off the field. How are we as queer women being treated and regarded? And what does it say if the owners and management don't want to, cater or pay attention to our community, our non-playing community? So we decided to start our own football team, and that's how the Prodigy came about. And one of the first things we did was to make sure that it was a welcoming environment, both athletically to any level of experience. So whether you had played, for several years, or whether you were coming from another sport or had never played any sports, we wanted to make sure it was an open and affirming space. But then partnering with organizations like Team DC, and then doing things with different entertainment groups like A to Z and Mim Soul, and just, getting, and TMS, like getting out there as fixtures in our community who want to continue to serve and show up and support and show appreciation for the people who are taking care of us and keeping us afloat. And that's been a huge part of, who we are, what we do. We look to serve all areas of the community. We've done it at homeless shelters. We've made brown bag lunches during the holidays. We do all of those things for all, communities of color, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity. But when it comes to, making queer spaces and being comfortable in queer spaces, again, although the team is not exclusively queer, we know who has our back. We know who's buying our tickets, who's sharing our social media posts, who's congratulating us, when we win awards and win championships. And we make sure that we always appreciate and make room for those people in our, in our media, in our public, our forward-facing material, but then also kind of behind the scenes. So that's kind of just what we do to expand the community, to lift it up, and just to make sure that we stay visible.
Thank you. Thank you both. Dane, do you want to say something? We just had someone pop on and then off. They're supposed to be here.
Right.
Yeah, I believe she'll be back. She's not feeling too good, but when she does come back, then we'll introduce her. But would love for everybody to have the chance to talk about the spaces that they've created, and we'll do any introductions when she comes.
Yeah, that was Sion, just because other people saw her, and she runs the Black Lesbian reading group, book club, actually it's called. And that's an important part, especially towards our literacy goals. But I'd like to talk about it, and maybe I'll be talking about it for a couple of minutes because I have a lot of history here. So I guess that's the thing about living a long time, right? You get to talk a little bit longer. But creating women's spaces and how important that is, I thought that was a really, really important subject for you all to talk about, because we know that we have fewer spaces where we can come together. But way back in this, when I came out, I think I came out in the mid 70s, and I was a part of the DC Black Repertory Theater, which was also another historic place to be. And as I came out and became aware of the DC community, LBG community, there were not that many, I thought it wasn't that many places for us to get together, but in hindsight, There were a lot more than we have now. So I remember like in the early 80s, not being able to find other uh, queer women of color, and that was an impetus out of which we created Sapphire Sapphos. There just was no group of us. I was working then, and I was luckily a culture vulture and a part of a group of people that were, Essex Hemphill and Tom Miner, Tom Lucas. That's my artsy fartsy group. And, we created spaces for art so that we could get together and be together as artists. Now, before we go back to just talking about women in queer spaces, we created more spaces where we were all together, period. My brothers, my sisters, and my transgender friends, we were all together. We weren't separated. We went to parties together. We had events together. We were artists, so we weren't interested in division. And we weren't interested in classism and racism and all that kind of stuff. We were just interested in creating spaces where we could be artists and play and enjoy ourselves. So as we look back, uh, certainly Sapphire Sapphos grew out of a sense of a need for Black women to come together. And that was early 80s, to talk and to be together, to bring educational programs, because a lot of us were coming out and coming together, and we had children. So there was really no place for children in the LBGT community, and we needed to talk about it. Well, how do you take care of your children in this type of lesbian relationship? How do you come out to your family? How do you deal with advocacy? How do you have a voice at the table? So that's why we created Sapphire Sapphos in the early 80s, and it ran for a long time. And then BLSG, Black Lesbian Support Group, grew out of sort of Sapphire Sapphos type of goal and need of having other women's spaces. And I remember going to BLSG meetings. And at some point, it became a part under Whitman Walker Clinic, and some people liked that and some people didn't. But either way, there's been we've had an unparalleled, disjointed way that we've gotten together all along that I can remember. We haven't had any real systems. I mean, people like Mary Farmer, who was bookstore, Mary, it'll come back to me. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Lambda Rising?
Yes, Lambda Rising was a lesbian bookstore. So you could go to the bookstore and find out how to meet other lesbians. Now, when I traveled all over the world and to different places in the United States, that's how I would meet other lesbians, is go to the lesbian bookstores. But now if you don't have those bookstores, you can't find them that way. The only way you can really find people these days are on meetups. I do believe. I've tried a few of the lesbian dating sites recently, and that is daunting, is all I can say. But anyway, maybe they are all daunting. I don't know. But I think that creating women's spaces has been important. And it also is, I talked earlier about progress decentralization. That has continued as we have aged. And I want to now make a comment as a 68-year-old, going to be 70 years in 2 years kind of lesbian person. Just to say that my sisters are getting lost, my white ones and my Black ones. We are getting lost. We're getting lost in our families, back into our families. Some of us have to go back and take care of ailing and aging parents. We're getting lost in nursing homes, and we're also getting lost in senior housing in all kinds of ways. And this is a problem with classism, because the white women aren't getting lost, and the Black women who have resources aren't getting lost. So it is a class issue, because now if you're looking for senior housing and you move into a senior house, there are no LBGT programs going on in there. So you go back in the closet. Most of my sisters, I'm going to speak for the Black ones because I've never been white, but most of my sisters are being pushed back into the closet and are disappearing back into our families, back into communities of people, and we're becoming powerless. So I want to put that on the table. And I also want to say to the young people out there, and Jordan, I'll include you and Sion in this because I've watched you all grow up. I was just looking at you all and saying, they look growner than when I knew them before. They are. I've been watching you all grow up, and that's a beautiful thing. But I want to say that when I go to places and I see sisters out there, Sheila, Sheila's out there and other people say to me, well, the older lesbians don't want to socialize with us and they don't want to talk to us. That is wrong. Absolutely wrong. You haven't asked us. You haven't asked us. So we can't find you because you're still running around in the bars and the clubs and we're not. So if you want to meet older, wiser, and experienced lesbians, you have to go find them, just like Dylan found me. And you have to talk to them and get the information because otherwise we're going to keep repeating the same patterns. If we don't document Sapphire Sapphos and the Black Lesbian Support Group and Lambda Rising, and even the Blade is owned by a woman. How many people know that?
I did not.
The Blade is owned by a woman. She should be on this panel. We don't have, I know I've been many places where I've been the only one, but there's not a white woman on this panel that is not transgender. And I guess she's not really white. But either way, I'm just saying we have to make places for all of us. We have to have places for all of us to come together, and we're losing each other. And certainly the coronavirus is going to impact us even more. I have a lot more thoughts about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Papaya, for talking about the spaces that you've created. We do want to welcome and have Cian to be able to introduce herself to the world watching and also the panel. Cian, feel free to just share anything about yourself and the work you've done in DC. And then after you finish introducing yourself, I'll actually direct the next question for you to start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Cian Lewis.
Hey, Cian.
It's good to see you, Papaya. I have been in DC for a really long time and worked behind the scenes on many, many things that we've have heard mentioned here today. Just a pleasure to be on the panel. That's all. Carry on.
All right. Once again, thank you so much for being
Talk to us talk to us about the Black Lesbian Book Club, please, because that's an important thing.
Sure. So I'm the leader of the Black Lesbian Book Club. It's been going on for the last 11, almost 12 years. It is one of the many informal spaces where Black lesbian or women who love women get together in DC. It has been a consistent space of where people come together to share, to be themselves, to be out if you're not out, to meet your next partner if you want to meet your next partner, to really have a really intelligent discussion with sisters of substance, as I like to say. It's really one of the last spaces where it really is like Black lesbian owned and Black lesbian run. At this point, I regard it as an institution. The end.
So my next question for the panel would be, and I'm obviously directing it to you, Cian, is what advice would you give to someone who wants to cause change in DC? They know that the needle needs to be moved. They know that change needs to happen. What would you tell that young person of how that needs to be done in DC?
That's a good question. And most of my career, I've also been in politics. So literally behind the scenes getting people elected, especially people in DC, council people and such, running various elections. Number one, the first place to get started is to get started. I think when I was young, I used to be allergic to this word. I used to be allergic to the word no. I just couldn't take it when people would tell me, no, you can't do that, or no, that's a crazy idea, or no, it can't be done. And I developed the muscle of just ignoring them, right? Ignoring them and just doing it anyway. I remember when I was super, super young, people told me, you would never get a woman elected mayor in DC. That would never happen. Oh. And just never taking no for an answer. And one really good way to do that is if you see something and you want to change it, it is not you railing against the powers that be. You actually have to spend your time enrolling other people in your vision, talking to people what you would like to see happen. When they ask, how can I help? Having an answer for them. Hey, you can help by doing this, this, and this. Asking people to share your vision with others and bringing people together around a platform where they can actually literally help, right? Get the thing done. The end.
Absolutely, Jordan. If you would like to answer, what would you implore someone to do if they're trying to get started? No change needs to happen. How would you say they should get involved in DC?
Well, I failed to mention this earlier. I'm also on the advisory committee for the mayor's office of LGBTQ affairs. And that's one of the things that we are discussing now is just how to make those kind of services and opportunities more visible to the community, because a lot of times they're there, you know, I mean, you all, even right here on this call, we have historians, we have, you know, activists, we have educators and, you know, a book club, things like that. But a lot of times people just don't know how to tap into those resources. So, you know, really just drawing on the network, building out the network, and then using different avenues that people may have, whether it's, you know, social media, word of mouth, websites for different services and opportunities to market other things going on that may only slightly pertain to the community that you may serve, but could benefit the community at large and create opportunities, you know, and someone could see it and say, hey, you know, I just heard about this reading group, let's go check it out, you know, something like that. I think that it's supremely important to leverage your network. And even if you are very committed to pursuing a passion or, you know, fighting a cause, you need help. And it might not always just come in the form of other people who see things the same way that you do. It may come in the form of, you know, other people who understand what you're trying to do, who have access to spaces that you don't have. So just like I was saying earlier, you know, never close yourself off to, you know, other opportunities. And if someone maybe doesn't necessarily agree with you, see what commonality there is that maybe you can capitalize on to help get your voice heard in a different and more unique way. So the network is, I think, by far the most important part, you know, staying consistent to who you are, making sure that, you know, your opinion or your voice or your position is known, but then also really just seeing how you can kind of, you know, get across to other people that may not feel exactly the same way, but to help you pursue your mission.
I'd like to also add something there that I think that it's very important. The approach that I'm using now for where I am now is to not only explore current networks, but be willing to open new networks. Like I continue to come back to the Rainbow History Project because it continues to come back to me. And because I know it's an important thing for us to leave as a legacy. So I do what I can right now, short of being on the board, but whenever I can help in any way, I'm open. I believe also us mentoring is important. Mentoring people who come to us. And sometimes I just mentor people just because I can. Like Dylan, I just, you know, it's like, okay, you came over here, you mine, okay? Really, yeah. Or I'm mentoring Kaija, who's working with the Dyke March. You know, I talk to her when she wants to talk. They know that they can call me and talk to me about whatever and ask me whatever and be able to connect with me. But they come to me. And I think that we have to be able to strengthen our networks around how we are connecting, and that we're connecting across not only our sexuality, but other common interests. you know, because a lot of us are interested in how poverty impacts us. Many of us, all of us are interested in Black Lives Matter. You know, I'm certainly interested in seniors and how they're showing up or disappearing. We have so many other issues in common that I think that if we can start organizing across lines, that it's going to be powerful. You know, I need to be working more with my transgender sisters, as well as I want to know where's D. Carey and the other women, transgender sisters who I was working with 20 years ago, because I know that they're still here. They are.
Oh, D. Curry is definitely still here.
Yeah, and I know some other ones, Earlene and all of those. You know, they're around somewhere. You know, I just happen to be a person that is willing to go and reach out to a lot of different people in a lot of different communities. But we all have to reach out to create.
Let me say something on that though, because in the trans community, we
Mhm.
have an issue where we have a lot of trans elders who, for whatever reasons, like haven't always stayed on the same political level as some of their youth, and instead of building bridges, often what we get is these youth out here don't want any of this. These youth out here don't want to do this work when we are at work.
Mm.
And so like D, I love D. D is my auntie. D, I will go out to anything D's organizing. D goes out to anything I'm organizing. You know, that's how we work, and that's how we believe it should work. But not everyone in our community has been like that. A lot of folks have been bought over over the years,
I
and
understand.
the other things that come with being in
Part
leadership.
of what I was saying though is that we have to go beyond personalities. You know, Earlene D, all of those. We're talking, those are personalities, but somehow they are important to the movement, and that we have to be willing, you know, to work beyond. I had some money last year for doing some public relations. I called all the youth organizations and hired some youth from Ruby's house to be able to put them on the street and put some money in their pocket during gay pride. I mean, I'm just saying we can reach beyond, and please, I'm not an angel, and I don't even care if most people like me or not anymore. I'm not even going there. What I do is I have a job and a mission, okay? And I'm going to continue to do that job and work that mission regardless of the personalities and people. We have to be willing to ask, keep asking them for the part that is important for us to make a part of our legacy. We have to go beyond for legacy's sake. We need their stories. We need all of our stories to be there, because too many people have even tried to cut me out of the LBGT HIV community in DC. When you look at the stuff around who did what in Washington, you don't even see my name on a lot of it. That's personality. That's people who had issues, and people who write history raising different people up. We have to create the history, and it has to be accurate. And the only way it's going to be accurate is if we make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Just before we pass it back over to Dylan for the next question, I do want to acknowledge that we're right at the 2:00 time, which means we could probably spend the next 15 to 20 minutes to begin wrap up. But I wanted to acknowledge our virtual community who's tuning in. We actually got a shout, no questions, but we got a shout out from Beta Kappa chapter of Beta Phi Omega Sorority Incorporated. They thank you all for being amazing women, spelled inclusively, for all you've done and all you are doing to pave the way for us today with a heart. So that is just an expression of gratitude from the younger generation or the current generation that's really standing on the shoulders of the work we continue to do collectively. And I just wanted to make sure that you all heard the voice of the people who are watching. Dylan?
All right, my last question for you all is what, over the years, what have been some of your favorite events or spaces that you've been able to be in, and why? Anybody can take it.
I miss Pride, and I really, really, really miss Black Pride, because those were places where we could all come together for sure.
Same. I don't think you realize how much you miss it or appreciate it until it's not an option for you. And I know that the Pride Commission is trying to do something virtual next month. And then also do kind of like a caravan, like car parade. It's just not going to be the same, you know. I mean, I'm glad that they're doing something, you know, to keep us together and keep us active. But, you know, walking through the streets in the dead of summer, or, you know, going to Howard Theater or Stadium for Black Pride, you know, Memorial Day weekend, just making that whole experience. I mean, I miss it. I miss the community that came with that. I miss the Her HRC events at town. I miss town. I miss large gatherings. You know, it's good now that we have social media to stay connected to people, but you know, even getting together with, you know, a handful of your quarantine friends, it pales in comparison to the things that, you know, you go to these parties, there's hundreds of people there and you're like, oh, why do I come? I don't want to stand in line. I don't want to wait for drinks. I don't want to do that. But now I'm like, please let me go somewhere. Let me stand in a line. Let me buy a ticket. Let me, you know, let me engage. You miss those social events. So I just can't wait. I hope that however the world looks when we come out of that, out of this, that we're able to hold on to a little bit of that community, because I think it's really important.
I miss lesbian bars because there have been studies all over the country that the lesbian bars have disappeared, and certainly there's no Black lesbian bars or clubs in DC, or men's bars or clubs in DC, I might add. So I miss those places because those are still places that I would go to, even though I'm not a heavy drinker, but I knew where to go find my people. So I could either find them through the bookstores or through the bars, the BBs. You know, I don't have either one of those right now, so it's forcing me to Zoom.
Yeah, I'm praying that the pandemic doesn't too adversely affect, you know, the few that are remaining, like Fireplace. I'm really glad that we have a League of Her Own now. You know, it's a small space, but it's a space that's dedicated to, you know, people who identify as women. And I know that we've had larger spaces over time, but for various reasons, they haven't been sustainable. So I think that we start small. You know, we have a fixture, and then, you know, we build from there. That business model, take that and hopefully, you know, grow it to something that can expand kind of to the caliber that other gender identities and other ethnicities have in terms of larger social spaces, you know, places like Nellie's and JR's, things like that.
I want to give a plug to Sion's organization, since she's not able to stay on with us, but the Black Lesbian Book Club, because I joined a few years back and I haven't been able to keep up my membership because it's a little difficult to read a book a month when you have a very busy lifestyle, which I do. And that's what they do. They read a book a month. But one of the things that I loved about that as a space is it was a place where there wasn't alcohol and drugs. It was all about us getting together on another different note. I mean, I'm okay with the bars and stuff, but a lot of us are not going to the bars, especially in that 50 plus category. You're not going to see them at the bars. You know, I've been up and I just move around a lot and people see me a lot. So you all know me, but you don't see the other ones because at 10 o'clock at night, they're going to bed, not out to a bar or to a club. So we're going to have to intersect probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're going to have to work that out.
That sounds like you need a day party, or
yeah, to do day parties. Just let's do it right after church on Sunday. I think that'll work.
once the weather warms up, there should be more of those. I mean, last year feels like it's so far away now. But you know, like we had Barcode, you know, DJ Mim and A to Z were throwing Sunday brunch events, particularly for, I mean, anybody could come, but really that 30 and up that wants to, you know, get it in, have fun, and then when it starts to get dark, go home, wind down, and get ready for work. Yeah. So those spaces exist too, but again, it's, you know, community. It's finding out, talking to people, and realizing, you know, kind of where those opportunities are. But we're good for a day party. So hopefully post-pandemic, we'll get back to that.
And I just
Thank you
want to
all.
emphasize
Thank
as,
you all.
as
I actually have one more. I have one more question I wanted to ask for my final question. What is our call to action? So we're wrapping up our panel. What is our call to action? If we had to give maybe like a 15-second.
Decrim now.
well, I
Decrim,
say
thank you.
I think the call to action is to keep reaching out and creating spaces and to be optimistic and to know that we need each other more than ever. So when Dylan reached out about this panel, I said yes. When he reached out about talking about the clubhouse, I said yes. When he reached out to talk about Sapphire Sapphos, I said yes. Whenever anybody reaches out to talk about any of those things, including, you know, the years that I spent as an executive director in the HIV field, I say yes. So we have to keep saying yes, and we have to mentor other people so that they can say yes too.
I would just say, don't be selfish with your knowledge and your story. You know, even in sharing this event with, you know, with my friends, letting them know that I was going to be on here, like I was thrilled, and I've learned, you know, a lot from Papaya and just from the discussion that we've had here. But you know, who knows who else I have now introduced to the DC Center, to, you know, the Lesbian Book Club, to those things, just by saying, hey, I know this, here it is in case you want to know it as well. So, you know, you don't have to be famous or, you know, a big personality or a big name to just, you know, share something that could greatly empower someone else. So kind of recognize your value in the community as a part of that very valuable network. And then don't be selfish with your knowledge. Just make sure that you're always talking and sharing and receiving as well.
And look back
And
towards the youth as well. I want to just say that we have to go for the youth, you know, Dylan and Kaija and other folks that are trying to do things like they're working on the Dyke March, you know. So when I first started talking to her, I was talking to her about the Dyke March, but very quickly I took her in as a person who I can see as one of us who's going to be here for the future. And so monthly I meet with her. I'm having dinner with her next week, not to talk about the Dyke March, but so that I can help her to live better, so that regardless of what she does, she can be more effective. So I think that we have to get rid of our egos and look at ourselves as whole people, regardless of what the position is, that we have to still move forward with our agenda, which has to be connecting to each other and upholding and strengthening our communities.
thank you. Emily, do you want to expand upon the answer that you gave for the call to action?
Yeah, well, my call to action was Decrim Now, which was a campaign that I've been involved in for over 4 years now. Some of y'all may remember we had a 14-long city council hearing last fall, of which most of the people that testified were bussed in from New York and out of state, and most of the people in DC who had disagreements over the bill weren't the same disagreements you heard from all the people that were bussed in. I actually didn't. We had a very fair shot because of how much publicity was involved in the bill. It like had people flying in from London that wanted to testify against it, and completely left out like the voices of DC people who do sex work, who are depending on this bill to survive. And so like in a motel room with a girl shot the other night while doing sex work, taking care of her. And like these girls out there, they don't have any safety net. They don't have any backup. Even the organizations out there that claim to be supporting them are just getting like hundreds of thousands of dollars from the city and aren't actually doing it. And so like these girls are getting killed every single night. Like the work that we've done with the housing saved a lot of people, but like that's not it. You know what I mean? Like we need to keep pushing that bar forward. And so like I honestly think right now it's really important for the whole LGBT community to stand behind the trans girls and make sure that they have the resources that they need, that they have the same material realities as the rest of the community. And yeah, so like I think decrim right now, decriminalizing sex work is one of the many ways that we can help get there, or at least one of the many ways that we can help. How do I want to word this? Like decriminalizing sex work to me is like are responding. What is that when like they're responding in a trauma care unit?
Triage.
What's this is us triaging the community, so then we're able to focus more on building that community back up. And like right now, like they really don't have nothing. In DC, an employer is 50% more likely to hire a less qualified cis person than they are a more qualified transgender person. 67% of the community in DC is in poverty. We have the largest per capita of transgender residents in the country. Like these are the identities that get printed on the Blade, that get printed on the Weekly of how progressive DC is, and we're leaving these people behind. And so I really think it's important that, like, you know, we start acknowledging that this community is a lot bigger than just the cisgender people, and that these people have been hurting, and there hasn't been any attempt to triage it, really, any attempt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Dylan, can I say one more thing?
Yes, one more thing.
Around how we can move forward. And I did mention earlier that the publisher of the Blade is a woman. Her name is Lynn Brown. And one of the things that Lynn and I are talking about doing, or were talking about doing before this pandemic, was doing a citywide town hall for women in this area to try and bring us together to talk about our issues, talk about housing, talk about connections, talk about networks, and to be able to publicize it through the Blade, which we thought would be a great way to connect the media. I'm not sure what's happening with the Blade and how difficult that's going to be, but they probably also have an online presence. But that's one of the things that we can do, is use the media to get our message out there and to amplify our message, and to work with people, again, like Lynn Brown, who's at the Blade and very interested in women's issues because she's a woman, and be able to try and incorporate as many people and as many point of views as we can.
Thank you so much for your gifts on today. Thank you all for being queer women of color in full power, who are unabashed, intentional in your work, and counted it not robbery to be able to gift us with the legacy of the work you have done, and also laying the groundwork of the work that can continue forward. So we thank you for your time today. Thank you for everyone who's joining us virtually in virtual land via Facebook or YouTube. And Dylan, do you have any closing words?
Honestly, when we created this, when we thought about this idea, we did really want to focus on queer women of color who created spaces, not just for queer women of color, but for other people in the community, and making sure that we uplift y'all's voices and y'all's experiences. Because like you said, Papaya, about HIV in the 80s in this city, like, you are very much a big part of that conversation, and your name is on almost nothing, and that's a problem. And so just
okay, baby, because that's why I surrendered the ego.
Yeah, and so just I'm really happy that you all were able to make the time to come talk with me and Dane, and share your stories and share what it's like to be an organizer of spaces, and all four of you all organize completely different spaces, and I like the diversity of the spaces that you all created, and because the diversity of spaces is definitely what is needed in the LGBTQ community, for us to find different ways to come together and also fight back and fight for our rights and our ability to be seen. Yeah, thank you.
How about ways
This
that you can get in
this
touch?
presentation will be recorded and captured on the DC Center's page. Also, Rainbow History Project will capture it, as well as the DC Center's YouTube. So if anyone's looking for the actual full recording after this, you can find it in those 3 places.
Thank you. Papaya, you were, what
I
were you
was
saying?
saying, as we talk about creating networks, it's a good idea for them to know how to get in touch with us.
That is true.
If
Do you want to
get,
say how people can
sure,
get in
if you want
contact
to
with
get in
you?
touch with me, you can get in touch with me through V as in victory, papaya man at AOL, or vpapayaman@gmail.com.
Jordan, would you like to?
Sure. So I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Facebook, I am Jordan Marie. That's my middle name. And Twitter and Instagram, I'm the Jordan Marie. And also, the football team that I was mentioning is www.washingtonprodigy.com or Wash Prodigy on IG.
Himalaya, did you want to plug or give out your information?
I deleted my Facebook this morning. I don't have a personal Twitter account, and I use my Instagram for sex work.
Email.
But you can find me at Emilia, that's EMMELIA at nojustice.nopride.org.
Thank you. Do you have anything else, Dane?
Everyone have a great day. Thank you so much for your time and allowing us to be able to catalog this for queer history.
Thank you so much.
Continuta.
Thank you.
The struggle continues. Let's keep doing it.
Yes, let's keep doing it.
Absolutely agreed. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.